Hi, I'm Brett from papercartridges.com, and I'm making this video as a thank you for you guys helping me get to 10,000 subscribers, something I never thought with my niche content that I would ever see. So that's really cool, and I'm genuinely thankful. And I figured the best way to say thank you is to go back and revisit the video that you guys hate the most. So we're going to step back into some real vintage paper cartridges content. I mean, real paper cartridges with a ridiculous amount of black powder in here. Something like 70 cents worth of Swiss powder in each one of these. But about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, I made a video called Sharpe's Madness, How Not to Load a Musket. And in the 1990s TV series starring Sean Bean as Richard Sharpe, Sharpe was teaching the South Essex Regiment a speed loading method for loading Brown Bess. It's kind of a form of tap loading. But Sharpe's version, you bite off the ball of the cartridge, spit it down the barrel after you prime and pour down the powder. The ball rolls down, you seat it with the tap, and you fire. You don't use the ramrod. And Sharpe claims this helps you save 20 seconds. It gives you a blistering rate of fire of 4 rounds a minute. So watch this and see.
Spits the bullet. No ramrod. Just a gentle tap of the butt to send it down. You save 20 seconds. Bite, pour, spit, tap. Bite, pour, spit, tap. Aim. Bite, pour, spit, tap.
3 shots in 10 seconds in hand, sir.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
1. 4 shots a minute.
So when Daryl and I covered this, we did not expect the outrage from the comments. I guess if you want a lot of thumbs down and negative comments, just be critical of Richard Sharpe. But the comments seem a little detached from reality. They seem to presuppose that Sharpe was a documentary, that Sharpe was a real historic figure, and instead of spit loading being a fictional plot device, it was a true and highly effective technique that doubled the rate of fire of Brown Bess. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy the Sharpe books by Bernard Cornwell and the Sharpe TV series. I mean, they're great fun, low budget, great fun. But before I get into the reasons why Sharpe's bite, pour, spit, tap method is a really bad idea still, that doesn't work and never did work and was never actually done in combat, we need something to compare it up against, like a baseline data point. So we're going to go shoot Brown Bess, and we're going to shoot it in the regulation manner using the ramrod and using the regulation ball cartridge. And we'll get some starting data to compare how much better or faster is Sharpe spit loading versus loading with the ramrod the old clumsy regulation way. So remember, Sharpe says you get 4 rounds per minute. So let's see how much time it saves us when we go shoot it. But first, a word from our sponsor.
We don't have a sponsor.
We don't have a sponsor? Oh, well, in that case, I guess we'll just go shoot it. This was a desperately hot and humid day, one of the worst I've felt here in Pennsylvania. And I wasn't even sure if the musket was going to fire. I'm not an expert with flints at all. I have ingrained muscle memory from percussion rifles. You'll see me trip myself up here in a moment. But I am not a professional at all. The soldiers of the South Essex, professional regular British Army line infantry, those guys would have been drilled until these motions could be done automatically and thoughtlessly. And I know my drill isn't correct for the Brown Bess, which was cast about while I am loading this like a rifle musket. And that probably costs me a few seconds in speed, but again, that's all I know. I'm a rifle musket guy, and I can only do what I'm used to. Now, believe it or not, I've only fired a flintlock maybe 2 or 3 times before, and This priming before ramming business feels so unnatural to a percussion guy. But even a clumsy dummy like me manages to get 4 shots in a minute and 15 seconds. That's 15 seconds slower than the 4 rounds in 1 minute that the spit-loading South Essex shot, so that means I have to try again. Notice how smoothly and easily the cartridge slides into the barrel with the knot pointing upwards. This will be important later. Oops.
Shots the minute!
And just for good measure and for fun, I thought I would shoot it a third time. I was hoping to bring it in under 60 seconds, but as you'll see, not quite. So a little over a minute that time, but basically we have our baseline data point now, even with the clumsy guy like me shooting. Brown Bess can be consistently fired around 4 times per minute, loading in the conventional way with the ramrod. And we can definitely assume a professional British regular soldier who's intimately drilled with his musket could manage at least what I could do, so at least 4 rounds per minute. And that means suspenseful pause. Sharpe's fictional bite, pour, spit, tap method is not any faster than the ordinary way loading with the ramrod. If you're absolutely determined to base your knowledge of 19th century military weapons and history on fictional characters from 30-year-old TV shows, there's nothing I'm going to say here that's going to convince you. But that would be like insisting that Inspector Clouseau gives real, historically accurate sources of European police investigations in the 1970s.
What is your name?
I'm Sharpe, the gardener.
And what is it you do?
I'm the gardener.
And why didn't you say that to me in the first place?
If you understand the difference between fiction and reality, and you've watched this far, I'm going to explain why Richard Sharpe's bite, pour, spit, tap technique is a dangerous and unrealistic waste of time, except as a plot device to beat the French. It works really great for beating the French. But it all has to do with this, the cartridge. The 19th century ball cartridge was deliberately made to be simple, quick, and easy to use. The ball is at this end. The ball is secured with string. This keeps it from sliding back down into the tube of powder during handling and transportation. Then there's the powder at the other end of the cylinder, and then the end is folded or twisted off. Depending on which method, the function is the same. It creates a fulcrum so that the soldier can bite off the end of the cartridge cleanly, and it exposes the gunpowder. The soldier can do that without spilling much, if any, of the powder. The knotted part at the top of the ball points straight up, so it doesn't bind as it slides down. And as you saw while I was shooting it, it'll slide right down in a clean barrel, probably without even using the ramrod. With some fouling in the barrel, I wouldn't trust it, especially with an old iron musket barrel. But Sharpe's method reverses the design intent of the cartridge. So instead of biting off the end designed to be bitten off, Sharpe tells the South Essex to bite the bullet off completely, the whole thing, and he never explains specifically how this is supposed to be done. Where do you bite it? Do you bite into the bullet? To the horror of dentists and the delight of orthodontists everywhere. Do you chomp right down into the bullet and then pull the bullet away from the cartridge? Or do you chomp down behind the bullet into the powder tube and separate the ball that way? Because somehow the ball has to end up in your mouth so you can spit it into the barrel. And from watching the South Essex do it, it definitely looks like they are chomping down behind the bullet and leaving the entire bullet in their mouth rather than just holding it in their teeth. Which makes some sense, because if you were just to gnaw down on the bullet itself and then try to pull it away from the rest of the cartridge, the powder would spray out like glitter, like a party cracker. So that wouldn't work. You really do need to chomp down behind the ball. And because I am a river to my people, I went out and actually shot this at the range. And I will have to voice over this part at the range because I was doing my best to be inconspicuous because I'm spitting stuff down the barrel at a public range. So I didn't talk while I'm doing it, but it's very hard to be inconspicuous while you're wearing a silly hat and shooting a Brown Bess at the public range. Maybe someday I can find some private property and that won't be an issue, but for now, in these benighted times, this is where we're at. This truly is as awful as it looks. For these first shots, I would bite off the bullet, prime, and pour the powder down regularly, but I'm not putting my head over a primed and loaded musket. So I took the bullet with my fingers and sort of randomly dropped it onto the muzzle as though I was spitting it there. But the bullet doesn't come out of the paper. It's tied with string. There's that large knot. The bullet will not roll. So it binds up and sticks in the muzzle. The knot doesn't matter when you're loading the regular way, but when spit loading, it keeps the ball from rolling in unless you manage to get it in at just the right angle. So this bullet ended up having to be rammed. And because I'm a gun channel on YouTube, federal law requires me to do an obligatory flintlock slow-mo video. So I try it again, bite the ball, prime and pour the powder in the usual way. But you'll notice here when I plop the bullet onto the muzzle, it will not go in at all. And then it falls off after I tap it. And I got to bend over and pick it up and put it back in. And of course, that's not saving any time. And you'll notice when I ram that the ball did not make it all the way down. It needed the ramrod to get it seated into the breech. I took a few more shots, but for these, I don't prime after I tear the ball off. Instead of priming for safety's sake, powder goes in the bore, and then I felt comfortable enough to spit the ball into the muzzle And you'll see here that from time to time, the ball will align itself and that knot will point up and it'll fall into the barrel. But I still ram it just to be sure because there's fouling in the bore and I don't want it to bind up. With a modern Pedersoli rifle, probably not a big deal, but if this was a iron barrel, original, could be catastrophic. And you'll notice I am priming with loose powder. Another aspect about Sharpe's spit loading method is that you don't put any of the extra cartridge paper down the bore. So there is no wad. If you were to put any of that extra paper in, you would have to ram because that paper forms friction. So you don't get a wad, and I'll explain why that matters here in a little bit. You can see that once the barrel gets a little bit of fouling in it, the ball goes down with increasing resistance. You can see all of the powder that ended up on the ground instead of going down the barrel. It just spills out everywhere when you bite the ball off that cartridge. And you'll notice that I didn't put the rest of the paper down the barrel because if I did, I'd have to ram. The paper forms a wad, and it definitely won't go down without being rammed, especially in a dirty barrel. Maybe it would in a clean barrel. But the bullet doesn't come out of the paper. The bullet is tied with string, and there's this large knot that will not roll down the barrel. It binds up. The knot doesn't matter when you're loading the regular way because the whole thing just goes straight down. But when you're spit loading, the knot prevents the ball from rolling in unless you manage to get the bullet in at just the right angle. And to be fair, this actually happened with one of the bullets that I spit loaded into the barrel. I tapped it a few times and it started to slide down. Now I wouldn't trust that it was going to slide all the way down to the breech, especially in a crusty, foul barrel. It probably wouldn't make it and it will need to be rammed. But most of the time, this slimy, wet, paper-wrapped ball just wedges over the muzzle, and sometimes tapping it made the bullet fall off completely, and I have to bend over, pick it up, and put it back in. And of course, that's not saving you any time. And I was biting the cartridges slowly and carefully to avoid as much as possible spilling the powder. There's no way not to spill some of the powder. And to be honest, I probably get 15, 20 grains of powder in my mouth, and another 10 grains or so just spills. And the ground was covered in loose powder when I was done shooting. And if I was trying to do this faster, if I was trying to load for speed like the South Essex, the powder would have gone everywhere. I don't think 50% of the powder would have ended up in the gun if I was actually loading this for speed. And before y'all go to the comments to tell me that I needed to tap harder to drive the bullet home, remember that's not what Major Sharpe said. Sharpe said a gentle tap is all it takes.
Just a gentle tap of the butt to send it down. You save 20 seconds.
And that works for me because this is not my musket. I borrowed this musket, and I'm not going to go all pile driver into the gravel at the range with a gun that I don't own. Now remember, spit loading is supposed to be for speed. That's the only point. And if you're having to smack the gun 15 times before the bullet finally starts to go down, how is that giving you any sort of military advantage? Well, you might say, oh, well, maybe you could take the bullet out of the paper in your mouth and then spit it down the barrel. And now you're adding another layer of complexity. It's like telling someone, tie a knot in a cherry stem while you're priming and loading a musket and see how well that goes. And any other way of trying to get the paper off of the bullet is just going to take more time. And again, that's defeating the entire purpose of spit loading anyways. You might as well load with the ramrod and do it right from the start. And speaking of tap loading, I should probably say, if you did remove the bite and spit part from Sharpe's instructions, loading without ramming is called tap loading. And that's where you drop in a naked lead ball with no paper around it after you've poured your powder, and you can tap the butt, and this is loose enough that it will generally end up seated at the breech. Because the ball is generously undersized. So the ball is about 69 caliber, and the barrels were about 75 caliber, give or take a metric smidge. When the ball is loaded with the cartridge paper, it generally has to be rammed, especially after 2 or 3 shots, builds up a coating of fouling in the barrel. But if you just load the ball by itself without any paper, it will drop right down. And this is known in the literature. It's a documented method that was used for loading rapidly. In fact, I've even encountered it during the American Civil War with rifle muskets. On occasion, units with 58 caliber rifle muskets get issued 54 caliber ammunition by mistake, and the Minier ball will drop right down the barrel. And so the soldiers just gave the butt a tap and they seated it, and of course it wasn't very accurate, but you could load it very quickly. So it is a documented, real historical technique that was done. But there is a glaring problem with tap loading. There isn't any paper forming a wad between the bullet and the powder. So that means the velocity of your bullet is going to be significantly lower. The paper of the cartridge is supposed to crumple up and seal the barrel behind the bullet so that when the gun fires, all that high pressure gas from the powder presses up against the wad that's sealing the bore, and it forces the bullet out at much higher speed. Without that wad, the gases are going to blow right past the ball. The ball is going to move a lot slower, and your barrel is going to foul up a lot faster. The velocity is so low that the ball may not even make it 100 yards without that wad. So even if, going back to bite, pour, spit, tap, if that does increase your rate of fire, you don't have a paper wad, so the bullets are going to be moving slower. They may fall to earth before they even reach the enemy, especially if you're spilling a lot of your powder during the loading process. So now you have a super anemic load, no wad. This ball is going to drop like a brick. And how quick you can load and fire your musket doesn't really matter if your bullets aren't even going to reach the enemy. Now, maybe the greatest irony of the whole bite, pour, spit, tap controversy is that Major Sharpe had enough time to teach the South Essex soldiers to do this spit loading technique, which means he would have also had time to have them simply reconfigure their ammunition, remove the ball from the paper, and just put the loose balls in their pocket, and then they could have tap loaded with none of this biting off the bullet and spitting down the barrel. And that would have worked as a functional plot device too, because the rate of fire would have been fast, and it actually plausibly would work. But it's nowhere near as exciting. Can you imagine the scene of a bunch of soldiers sitting around disassembling their cartridges? Because instead, you have, with bite, pour, spit, tap, you've got Sean Bean running around with the shirt off, bouncing up and down the line, shouting at people. You got ensigns with pocket watches counting down the seconds. It's very, very exciting. And because it's exciting, people have actually gone out and done it because it's just so cool. They've gone and they've spit the ball down a primed and loaded musket, and they upload it to YouTube, and this video gets almost 1 million views. And that inspires the next wave of people to go out and try to shoot it. Now, that said, I am thankful that recently there have been several people supporting me and calling out the danger and inaccuracy, historical inaccuracy, of Sharpe spit loading. My friend Brandon F. did a video not too long ago, pretty in depth. He didn't shoot it though. That's kind of why I made this video, to go shoot it and demonstrate the things that he said, why practically they don't work. Ethan from 11 Bang Bang went out and shot it. Jake from Everything Black Powder. I know he was testing the accuracy of just a naked tap-loaded ball. He might have also tested the velocity. I can't remember. But definitely go check those videos out. I can recommend them because they did it safely. They primed after the ball was loaded. So I can encourage you to go watch those videos. And if you ever want to do this, that is the way to do it. Please, if nothing else, don't put your head over a loaded musket. And I hope you understand why there's no reason to, both historically then and now for recreational shooting. But I'm Brett for papercartridges.com. It's too late to help me get to 10,000 subscribers, but you could help me get to 20. And if you can like this video or dislike it, either way, it will help the algorithm. Same thing for comments. Tell me how much you enjoyed it or tell me how wrong I am. Either way, it's good for the algorithm. But I appreciate your time. I hope this was useful to you. I hope this puts this controversy to bed for all time. And I will see you next time.